Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right in, because today we are setting off on what I can only describe as an absolutely incredible historical, scientific, and archaeological journey. We're going to trace the monumental lineages of Prophet Ibrahim, or Abraham. This is a story that has literally shaped the history of the world, branching into two distinct paths through his two sons, Ishmael and Ishaq. And we're going to look at the fascinating evidence that anchors these ancient narratives right in reality.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 6 key areas: the shared origin, Ismail and the desert, the miracle of Zamzam, building the Kaaba, the great sacrifice, and finally, Ishaq and the Israelites.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the shared origin, waiting for an heir.
Our story really begins with, well, immense patience. For years, Ibrahim and his wife Sarah earnestly prayed for a child, but old age was setting in and they remained childless. Now, modern discoveries actually give us the exact social context for what happened next. Over in Syria, archaeologists found the 18th century BC Nuzi and Mari tablets. These are written in ancient Semitic languages, the very root of Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic. And according to these historical inheritance tablets, if a wife couldn't have children, it was totally customary for her to offer her maidservant to her husband to bear a child on her behalf. It's like a giant puzzle coming together, because this perfectly aligns with what we see in the book of Genesis, where Sarah herself suggests that Ibrahim have a child with Hajar.
And that brings us to this really profound number, 86. I mean, think about that. After 86 years of waiting, Ibrahim finally receives the glad tidings from an angel. Hajar gives birth to his very first son, Ismail. This wasn't just a birth. This was the beginning of a massive new chain of revelation and knowledge.
Moving right along to Section 2, Ismail and the desert, a divine test in Hijaz.
But this joyous expansion of the family, it met a severe test. Following a divine command, Ibrahim took Hajar and the infant Ismail to the Hijaz, an area near modern-day Mecca. The Royal Geographical Society confirms this area is a 10,000-year-old volcanic desert plateau covered in basalt lava flows. It was entirely barren, yet strategically located right on ancient caravan routes. Furthermore, genetic studies from 2011 trace the Y chromosome haplogroup J1 in Arabia, which heavily supports this ancient Semitic ancestry. We even have 8th century BC inscriptions in Qaryat al-Faw directly linking tribal names to Ismail. So the science literally backs up the ancient scriptural accounts. Absolutely fascinating stuff.
Which leads us into Section 3, the miracle of Zamzam, a mother's desperation.
Imagine the scene. Ibrahim had to leave Hajar and Ishmael in this desolate valley with just a few dates and a little water. When those supplies ran out, a desperate Hajar ran frantically back and forth between two hills, Safa and Marwa, 7 times looking for passing caravans. Then God sent the angel Jibril, who struck the earth right where the infant Ishmael sat. A spring of water miraculously gushed forth. Hajar called out Zamzam, meaning stop or gather, to contain the water. And amazingly, this exact desperate, loving path of a mother is recreated by millions of people today during the Hajj and Umrah pilgrimages, an act known as the Sa'i.
Now, this wasn't just some temporary puddle, right? Modern analysis from King Saud University reveals the Zamzam Well is 30 meters deep, sitting right in a geological fault zone amidst those volcanic rocks. It is a continuously refilling confined aquifer. It's rich in calcium and magnesium. And get this, it has a natural fluoride concentration that completely prevents bacterial growth. It doesn't even need chlorine to be purified. A 4,000-year-old uncontaminated water source that modern science looks at as an absolute marvel.
All right, Section 4, building the Kaaba, the first house.
Let's fast forward in time. Ismail grows up in this valley, and his father, Ibrahim, returns. Together, they're commanded to build a house dedicated purely to the worship of one God. Islamic tradition actually holds they were raising the foundations of a site initially established by Prophet Adam. They placed the black stone, the Hajar al-Aswad, as a cornerstone. And history confirms this location's huge significance. Archaeologists have found evidence of a sanctuary for caravan trade here dating back to between 2000 and 1800 BC. Even the Bible, in Isaiah, references the flocks of Kedar, who was Ismail's son, gathering at an altar in Arabia. Later on, in the 5th century BC, the classical historian Herodotus recorded a sacred Arabian sanctuary where annual pilgrimages took place. This was the Awal Bait, the first house for humanity.
And you know, the brilliance of its construction goes way beyond just the physical stones. Back in 1977, astronomer Dr. Gerald Hawkins found that the Kaaba's axis perfectly aligns with the summer and winter solstices, the sunrise and sunset. Its bedrock is solid natural granite. So it wasn't just a building. It was deeply, astronomically, and geologically anchored to the Earth and the cosmos.
Now for Section 5, the Great Sacrifice, a Test of Devotion. We've reached what is arguably the most intense trial in Ibrahim's life, a recurring dream commanding him to sacrifice his most beloved son. Now, historically and scripturally, there is a divergence here. Islamic tradition centers this monumental test on Ismail, taking place near Mecca in Mina, an event commemorated by the global sacrifice of Eid al-Adha for thousands of years. On the flip side, the Judeo-Christian tradition centers this test on Ishaq, taking place in Jerusalem at Mount Moriah, which is known as the binding of Isaac. But regardless of which son it was, both traditions completely agree on the core message: Ibrahim's absolute, unwavering obedience to God and the miraculous divine intervention where God replaces the son with an animal to be sacrificed instead. But to truly grasp why this divine intervention was such a game changer, we kind of have to look at the historical context of the Levant at the time. Enter Moloch. Archaeological excavations at ancient Canaanite and Levantine sites like Carthage have uncovered some horrific truths. Literal, burnt remains of children. Ancient cults genuinely sacrificed their own children to a deity named Moloch in exchange for agricultural fertility and power. So Ibrahim's test was a dramatic divine statement against all of this. God demonstrated that true faith is about devotion, for sure, but ultimately the Creator is merciful and completely rejects the shedding of innocent human blood, saving the child.
And that brings us to our final leg, Section 6, Ishaq and the Israelites, the miracle in Levant. So let's shift our narrative focus away from the Arabian desert and head back over to the lush, fertile regions of Palestine. Here, Ibrahim and his first wife Sarah are visited by 3 angels in the form of men, and they deliver what seems like completely impossible news. Sarah, despite her extreme old age, will give birth to a son named Ishaq. This was an absolute miracle, designed to kick off a divine system that would eventually yield the Israelite prophets.
And once again, archaeology steps in to profoundly anchor this lineage. In places like Tel Hebron and Mamre in modern-day Palestine, we find ancient Canaanite and Israelite settlements connected to Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub. At Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, ancient altars and sacred stones have been discovered. Plus, when Ishaq grew up, his father sent a servant to find him a wife, Rivka or Rebecca, from their relatives in Haran and Nahor. Today, archaeologists have actually mapped those ancient caravan routes and the very wells described in the texts. Both the Dead Sea Scrolls and Ugaritic texts further confirm the historical presence of Ishaq's lineage, firmly rooted in Palestine and Syria.
Later on, Ishaq and Rivka go on to have 2 very distinct sons. Esau was known for his focus on hunting and living a rugged life, but his brother, Yaqub, was deeply inclined towards spirituality and wisdom. And it's through Yaqub that this specific lineage continues. Yaqub becomes the ancestor of the Israelites, the Bani Israel, forging the path for a massive line of renowned prophets, including Musa, Davud, and Isa. Which really brings us to this incredible climactic summary. You have 2 massive, world-shaping historical branches springing from the exact same root. On one side, you have the Arab tribes descended from Ismail, tested in the harsh volcanic desert of Mecca, eventually bringing forth the final prophet of Islam. On the other side, the Israelites, descended from Ishaq, thriving in the fertile lands of Palestine and Syria, bringing forth a long, unbroken chain of prophets. Genetically, historically, and spiritually, they share the exact same father.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. If 2 incredibly divergent paths that have shaped so much of our modern world, can be born from one single father, isn't the ultimate legacy of Ibrahim not one of division, but rather the unifying message of one God? This shared thread of Tawheed, or monotheism, weaves thousands of years of human history, connecting deserts and fertile valleys, science and scripture. It really makes you rethink how connected our shared human history truly is. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer,